class is the backbone of any thriving economy, whether it's about spending or saving or investing, and all in ways that keep the wheels of growth of economy turning. But what happens when that very backbone starts to feel the pinch? When disposable income starts shrinking under the weight of high taxes, rising costs, stagnating wages. So the murmurs of tax terrorism, they have been growing, and the upcoming budget is expected to be a moment of reckoning this time. So the question we're asking, are Indians being taxed more than they should? Is this the last chance for the Finance Minister to ease that tax burden on the middle class? And if so, will the government finally loosen its grip to spur economic growth? Let's break it down. For that, I'm joined by Harsh Rungta, founder of Fee-Only Investment Advisors, a vocal advocate for tax reforms, a keen observer of India's economic trajectory. Harsh, always a pleasure having you on the show. Welcome to India Tonight. Now, under 40 hours before the FM rises to deliver her budget speech, Harsh, if the burden of taxes is not eased on the middle class, what's your reading? Would the government be killing the goose that lays the golden egg for them?
I think some will argue that the goose is probably pretty sick right now. And I think those are the murmurs that you hear. You know, the middle class is caught in a pincer moment, right? They are not poor enough to be part of the beneficiary side in the giveaway, competitive giveaway regime that has taken place in the political landscape. Unfortunately, the uh, increased amount of taxes, whether they be capital gains or any other kind of uh, things that are there, it affects them much more. It affects their standard of living than it affects the richer people. It affects both of them, but it affects the middle class more. And I think whilst obviously there are demands for tax slabs being changed and the rates being rationalized, etc., and which also we may probably see in the budget. But this issue about tax administration, I think, and this talk about tax terrorism coming back. I mean, you look at the way that the tax rebate issue has been handled. I mean, unilaterally, without support of the law, the tax department decided that tax rebate is not available on certain kinds of income. If you have certain kinds of income, the tax rebate is not available. This was without support of the law, and the utility that they made didn't allow that tax rebate. It was only on the intervention of a high court that the tax department had to backtrack, allow 15 days more, and allow that rebate. I think that cuts a very, very sorry, and I think that is a symbol of all that is wrong with the tax administration. And this is one area where things can be improved
So the
without
administration
any.
is not what it needs to be. But why is it not? And why is it not being worked on, Harsh? The economy is sluggish. GDP growth is back to sub 5% levels. Private investment, stagnant. Consumption is tapering off. And many argue that a tax cut for the middle class would be the fastest way to revive demand. Would you agree with that? And why is it not something that the government sees as crucial, according to you?
So I think tax cut definitely will boost demand, and I think we should see something. In fact, I was going beyond the tax cut. So I think tax cut has been really spoken, and it is something that's really needed, especially for this, the backbone, as you mentioned, which is hurting right now. The backbone that earns up to 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs a year. I mean, that is the backbone of this country, and they are really hurting. And I think for them, a tax cut, putting more money in their pockets will really help. What will also help, over and above the tax cut, as I said, are reforms in the tax administration. You have appeals that haven't been heard for 7 years. 7 years. This is at the administrative first level of tax. Uh, and in the meanwhile, the tax department collects 20% of the disputed demand, then adjust future refunds against that. So I think this is one area. As I said, the tax department should not be allowed to become a law unto themselves. Disallowing that rebate, I think, was a symbol of the
Mention
level
that.
to which the tax administration is unfriendly
Right, but
to the
we even
common people.
heard, Harsh, from the former Infosys CFO Mohandas Pai, and he was speaking about how the middle class is getting squeezed, soaring EMIs, expensive education, both at school and college, the rising food costs, that food basket has been becoming more expensive, salaries, though, remaining stagnant. So now the question is, can the middle class be expected to drive growth when their own budgets are so much under strain?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're clearly under strain. And look at the threat looming over the middle class when the threat of jobs, of AI, impacting certain kinds of jobs, okay, will impact this class the most. It will impact all of us, but it will impact the middle class the most because they are doing the jobs that may be taken over. A lot of them are not young, so that they, for them to pivot to something that will benefit from the AI revolution might be so. AI revolution overall will help, but it will have losers and winners, and this class is likely to be among the losers on a majority basis, on a significant majority basis. And I think it can need all the help that it needs, not just in the form of tax cuts. So whether it is tax administration, better tax administration, or look at the mess that EPFO is. I mean, I know that's not finance ministry, that's labor ministry, but look at the mess. Your own money you're not able to get back. Or look at the unclaimed amounts. That's, whether it is the unclaimed listed shares, that's about 83,000 crores,
Yes,
or, insurance unclaimed, or, other securities, mutual fund unclaimed, or unclaimed bank deposits. If you add up all of them, that's 1.5 lakh crores.
right,
And the process to get that back is very, very difficult.
right,
And we were promised a centralized portal that seems nowhere on the
right.
horizon. The
So
process remains
efficiencies in
difficult.
administration
Now,
is
those
something
are
that I see you pointing towards the inefficient administration. But in terms of being able to deliver tax cuts, here's the dilemma. The government is already stretched thin on revenue. They are heavily dependent on tax collections. If they cut taxes, now the question is, where would that money come from? Would they need to borrow more? Will they go to the markets to borrow more? Should they run higher deficits? Because, of course, fiscal discipline is an important piece. What's the trade-off over here that you think the government could go for if they're not going to cut taxes?
So that's the point I'm saying. So look at unclaimed assets. Unclaimed assets are 1.5 lakh crores, if not more. Okay. The process is horrendous. You can't get back your own money or the money of your deceased loved one. If that the government said, and this is not coming out of the budget. This money is not from the budget. So this can be released back, and typically it is this middle class that will get the benefit of these unclaimed assets. Or look at the, as I said, the EPFO. Okay, refund reductions on getting your own money back
So
is
you're saying that
higher than I think 34.
unlocking the value that is being held over there could be an access route for the government to be able to generate more for the middle class, giving them more to spend, and that is one route that they should apply. But consumption, which is going down, Harsh, would you put it down as a symptom of an economy that is slowing down? Or would you say it is the real cause?
The economy is cyclical, right? So obviously we have seen a slowing down of the growth rates or the moderating of the growth rates, I would say, and we've clearly seen that. And the consumption story clearly is slowed down. It has slowed down, and I think some of the boosts that the government is giving, which is also coming from the budget, is for the government employees. They have announced the next pay commission. Okay, but I think the non-government employees also need that kind of a break. And I think the government needs to find that money, the tax cut money from somewhere
But,
to be able to give them some tax cuts. I
right.
do believe some tax cuts will come, but whether it will be sufficient or not
But are you saying that this is a cyclical problem, Harsh, or is this structural in nature? That's what I'm trying to get at.
it's a tough one. I think whether it is cyclical or structural, we will only know in hindsight. And
Unfortunately.
we are in
And
early
we need to
stages
act
of the
now.
slowdown.
We need to
Sorry.
act now to be able to mitigate the kind of risks that are involved to the growth in our economy. But meanwhile, Harsh, despite India's tax to GDP ratio being lower than many developed countries, we do rely, maybe some would say disproportionately, on indirect taxes like GST. And given that indirect taxes impact everyone equally, whether they are rich or poor, the question is our tax system regressive then? Should there be a shift towards more direct taxation?
So our system is regressive. I mean, I don't think there is any questions because even if you, so one is you mentioned that we rely very heavily on indirect taxation, which affects everybody. Even within direct taxation, you will see that the personal income tax, money tax paid by people like you and me, uh, have now overtaken corporate taxation. Okay, and very very clearly, I think that's a good sign. That's really a good sign. But given what is happening, given the fact that there is such a slowdown in consumption, I think the government has to reward back. Today, the salaried class, particularly, is feeling left out in the cold very, very clearly because the self employed, whether they are professionals or not, are able to employ tax saving measures to sort of pay lower taxes. But what happens to the salaried people? They are not able to do that. And so that is what I said. To them, you need not just a cut. Cut is not enough, but even better tax administration so that their interactions with the tax department are pleasurable
Right.
rather than it's like
Adversarial.
visiting
Yes.
getting your tooth pulled out
Right.
without anesthesia.
Right. But more than tinkering with tax slabs or cutting down on tax rates, the buzz over the last couple of budgets has been around simplification. Why is that turning out to be the larger theme rather than slashing tax rates, you think?
So the emphasis on simplification frankly scares me, Vikram, because anywhere else in the world, if you see simplification, you cannot do tax simplification without sacrificing tax revenue. It's not possible, right? It's become complicated because they put various routes to try and save the tax planning things that people were doing. Now, if you are going to unravel that and make it simple, it will lead to some amount of tax giveaway. And the government probably just does not have the room to do that. So I think simplification in effect will probably mean more complication is my fear. I'm very happy to be proved wrong. I'm extremely happy to be proved wrong,
Yes.
but my fear is that the tax simplification will turn out at best to be an exercise in futility, but at worst, which is very much possible, it will actually lead to more complication.
That's an interesting take. But in terms of the government's ability to cut tax rates, the government was clearly bold enough to slash corporate tax rates. It brought it down from 30% to 22% in 2019. That cost them 1 lakh crore rupees in revenue. Why do you think they're not applying the same approach to personal income tax? Is there some reluctance in trusting the Indian consumer to use that extra money wisely? Why would they not do it?
So if you look at that tax cut, the reasoning behind that tax cut was to bring our tax rates in line with the rest of the world. Okay, and I think the reasoning was that whatever money the corporates will save, they will reinvest it back into production capacities, etc., so that that will give a fillip to the economy. The corporates have broadly said thank you very much, have kept the money and I've either distributed it. They've basically not invested. Our investment rate hasn't really gone up. So will the consumers do the same? Is a dilemma that probably the government has. But as far as the middle classes are concerned, I don't think they have a choice but to increase consumption given the pincer that they are in. So I think the consumption will go up. And I think the government should trust the taxpayer. And any case, we are a far more networked economy today
Yes.
to be able to, save on taxes by employing tax planning measures
Yes.
is very limited. And therefore, I think if tax cuts are given, if similar tax cuts are given to individuals, the chances that they will increase their consumption is
Yes.
far higher, and they should not go by the what was example that was set by corporates who sort of have sort of sat on the money rather than
Yes.
invested it in production.
Exactly. So that private sector capex not having gone up, and that's where the government is doing the heavy lifting. In response to what you're saying in terms of the possibility of tax cuts, critics say the government is taking a different route. Their focus could be on collecting the maximum taxes and spending big on marquee infrastructure projects. You're talking about bullet trains and highways and airports, rather than putting money directly into the hands of consumers. Do you think that strategy is flawed in a sense, or do you think it's a different approach to keeping the economy up and alive?
It's trickle down theory for you, and I don't know. First of all, trickle down at its very best also works very slowly. It's an homeopathic medicine at best, so it takes time before it will have effect. And whether it works at all, I think is a question
Right.
that needs to be answered. One other thing that makes the middle class angst so high is the huge base of agricultural income, okay, that is not being taxed. Now, I know that politically it is not probably possible for any government to tax it. I am not sure whether it is possible or not, but it definitely is leading to a lot of angst on the no, when
Yes.
middle class people see very, very rich farmers
Yes.
pay no taxes,
Correct.
and that just adds to their angst a
So
lot.
we haven't widened our
What the
tax
government
net.
can do about it, one doesn't know.
Right. So our GDP, as much as we try and become a richer economy, and we'll have a lot of catch up to do with other developed economies in the world. But in the meantime, if we don't widen our tax net and have more people paying taxes, this burden that we're talking about on the middle class, do you see it keep growing?
Oh, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, and you will see the middle class becoming more and more sullen. Okay, and because they realize there is no escape, and
Right.
I'm talking of the middle class that's salaried,
Right.
because they really have no choice uh, but to you know
Correct.
grin and sort of pay the
So
tax.
very
So they're now grimacing and paying the
yes,
tax.
yes. So very rapidly, if I can ask you very pointed questions before we wrap it up, Harsh, is tax relief for the middle class overdue or unnecessary?
Absolutely overdue.
If the government had to cut one tax, GST or income tax, which one should it be?
That is a tough one. I would vote for GST because that gives a flip across the board. But I think publicly income tax might be more popular. I'm not very sure.
Are we overtaxed or just badly taxed, Harsh?
So if you look at that's a very interesting question. I'll just take 1 minute. I mean, as far as rates go, okay, we reasonably compare, even if you use purchasing power parity theory, we're reasonable on tax rates. Okay. It's not that we are way in the, very high tax nations. So I think the real issue is the manner. And a very interesting article was there in ET today, in Economic Times itself
Yes,
today, which spoke about how our tax machinery is extractive in nature. We have inherited it from the British, and it is extractive in nature. And that nature has not changed despite 75 years of independence.
yes,
That nature has not changed at all. I think a movement to change the culture of the tax machinery, not just direct taxes, even indirect
right,
taxes. I
right.
think the need to change the nature of that machinery is very, very
That
important.
you think is more
And
overdue?
I think,
Yes,
sorry,
that you think is more overdue?
absolutely.
Yes. Harsh, in passing, Budget 2025, we have less than 40 hours to go for it. Are we likely to see some real relief for the middle class, or do you think it's going to be more of the same?
It's a tough one for me to answer. I think that's locked into the finance minister's this thing.
Well, we don't
It
have too
would
long to
be.
wait for that. Yes. But Harsh, it's been a fascinating discussion, no doubt. Clearly, taxation, not just about percentages and slabs, it's about trust and fairness and economic vision. And as we count down to budget day, one thing is quite certain, the expectations are sky high, as they should be, of an economy that is growing at the scale at which it is. Will the government finally ease the tax burden and let consumers breathe, or will it stick to the current playbook? We have not too long to find out this. And thanks for joining us, Harsh, with your insights. It's always a pleasure getting them on the show. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks, Vikram.
Meanwhile, we're tracking the insurance universe as well, and the insurance regulator has reviewed health